It usually begins with a thought you are almost afraid to admit to yourself. What if my worrying is not protecting me at all? What if it is the very thing holding my life in place? For many women, that question arrives quietly, somewhere between errands, work, family responsibilities, and the late-night mind spirals that never seem to stop. It feels strange, almost forbidden, because most of us were raised to believe that worry is a form of love, a form of responsibility, and a sign of maturity. From a young age, women receive the message that if you care, you worry. If you want things to go well, you plan for what could go wrong. If you want to protect the people you love, you learn to imagine every possible disaster before it happens. You become the emotional safety net, the invisible planner, the person who holds everything together. Over time, worry stops feeling like a reaction and starts feeling like a personality. You forget that there was once a version of you who didn't live with a knot in her chest. But Carl Jung offers a different lens. He suggests that life does not respond to fear the way we think it does. Life does not get better because you panic. Life does not open because you brace for impact. Life does not calm down because you shake. Instead, life organizes itself around clarity, around self-trust, around inner alignment. Worry is not a strategy. It is a nervous system stuck in a loop that no longer fits who you are becoming. This is where the shocking question enters, the one most people never think to ask. If worry were something you learned, could it also be something you unlearn? And if that is true, then what parts of your life would change the moment you stopped feeding everything with fear? Think about your real-life moments, the text you reread 10 times before sending, the silence overthinking before you ask a simple question, the way you stay up rehearsing conversations that never happen, the guilt that creeps in when you rest, because some part of you believes that relaxing means you are falling behind. None of this is weakness. It is conditioning. It is the body confusing anxiety with preparation and fear with responsibility. Here is where the shift begins. Before reacting, pause and ask yourself one sentence. Is this helping the situation or only helping my fear? That question alone can create a small crack in the mental routine, just enough space for a breath, a thought, a choice. Not everything needs to be managed. Not everything needs to be controlled. Some things need to be allowed. Because if worry was learned, then there must have been a moment where it began. And that means there can also be a moment where you learn to let it go. And that is where the real story starts. When worry loosens its grip, something else steps in to take its place. And life, slowly but unmistakably, begins to respond. It often begins the moment a woman realizes she is more worried about holding everything together than actually living inside her own life. Not because she is weak, but because she was trained to believe that control is the price of safety. Control of her reactions, control of her tone, control of every outcome that might go wrong. Bit by bit, she becomes the emotional anchor for everyone else, even if it drowns her silently. This fear is not dramatic or loud. It is quiet, daily, and practiced until it feels like second nature. Women learn to monitor themselves long before they monitor the world. Do not upset him. Do not disappoint her. Do not take up space. Do not need too much. Be agreeable, be patient, be easy to love. It is a curriculum handed down like an invisible inheritance. And so, what looks like kindness is often obligation. What looks like strength is often hypervigilance. What looks like devotion is often fear wearing polite clothing. Carl Jung would call this the persona, the version of you that exists to be approved of, instead of the version of you that exists to be real. The persona smiles while the stomach knots. The persona reassures while the heart is tired. The persona worries because somewhere inside you were taught that worrying makes you responsible, thoughtful, and good. But the self underneath knows the truth. Fear is not a personality, it is a survival strategy. This shows up in ordinary moments that feel small from the outside but enormous from the inside. You rewrite a text 4 times because you do not want to sound needy. You say yes to a favor even though you are already overwhelmed. You apologize before asking a question. You try to predict someone's disappointment before it happens so you can avoid it. You convince yourself that if you can control the moment, you can control the outcome. If you can control the outcome, you can control the pain. But control is a heavy religion to worship. It asks for sacrifices. It trades aliveness for predictability. It trades authenticity for approval. And slowly, it becomes the architecture of worry. Not because you want to live like this, but because this is how you were taught to survive love, family, work, and expectations that were never built with you in mind. Here is the practical turning point. Write this sentence somewhere you will see it. Worry is not my personality. It is what I was taught. Then ask yourself 2 questions slowly and honestly. What is truly my responsibility is not mine to carry anymore. This small separation creates a doorway. On one side is the persona trying to control everything to stay safe. On the other side is the self who wonders if safety might come from clarity instead of worry, from boundaries instead of overthinking, from presence instead of prediction. This is where the paradox begins to reveal itself. You grip harder because you want life to stop falling apart. But in the process, your grip becomes the very thing that keeps you from receiving help, softness, support, and reciprocity. You try to control every detail so you will not lose anything. But slowly, you lose yourself in the details. And that leads us to the truth most people never want to confront. The harder you grip, the more you lose. There comes a moment when a woman realizes that she is not exhausted because she is weak, but because she is pouring energy into places that refuse to hold it. She is not drained because she does not care enough. She is drained because she cares in rooms where no one notices the weight she carries. Letting go is not the moment she stops trying. It is the moment she stops abandoning herself in the name of trying. It is not surrender to failure. It is a surrender to reality. In real life, letting go sounds quieter than people expect. It sounds like not sending the paragraph-long text explaining what they already know. It sounds like not reopening a conversation that ended in circles last time. It sounds like canceling plans that require you to betray your peace just to maintain someone else's comfort. It sounds like silence that is not passive or avoidant, but protective and intentional. Letting go often begins in moments that do not look dramatic but feel like freedom. One woman lets go by no longer being the only one who apologizes just to restore peace. Another lets go by answering later instead of immediately because her nervous system deserves space before her words show up. Someone else lets go by not chasing the clarity that another adult should have offered without being asked. These are not acts of distance, they are acts of dignity. Letting go is not punishing someone. It is remembered that your self-respect also deserves a home. The fear that often rises here is simple and human. If I stop trying, everything will fall apart. But here is the truth most people never learn. Things do not fall apart when you stop trying. They fall apart when you stop carrying what was never yours to carry. When a woman lets go, she stops bleeding energy into situations, people, or expectations that refuse to meet her. She stops leaking her worth into conversations where she has to beg to be understood. She stops offering explanations to people who benefit from pretending they do not hear her. Carl Jung would say, "This is the moment the psyche stops negotiating for love and starts negotiating for peace." A woman who lets go does not collapse. She reorganizes. She sees more clearly who stands with her and who only stands close enough to benefit. She sees who adjusts when she stops overgiving and who leaves because they were only staying for what she provided, not for who she is. Letting go does not ruin relationships, it reveals them. Here is your practical step toward release. Let go of one small thing today, not everything, just one thing. A reply you do not owe, an apology you do not mean, a fear you cannot solve alone, a conversation you have had 5 times with the same outcome. Release one rope you have been gripping so tightly that your hands are tired. You may be surprised to discover the rope was not holding you up. You were holding it up. And when the grip loosens, something powerful begins to happen. It often surprises people that the turning point in a woman's life is not loud. It is not a confrontation, an argument, or a dramatic exit. It is the quiet moment when panic stops running her decisions and clarity begins to lead. It is the moment she stops responding to life with fear and begins responding with presence. Panic is a survival strategy. Calm is a strategy of power. The woman who stops reacting instantly and starts choosing intentionally is not becoming distant. She is becoming sovereign. In real life, calm does not mean she feels nothing. It means she stops explaining everything. She no longer rushes to justify her boundaries. She no longer races to fix misunderstandings that someone else created. She no longer texts paragraphs to prove her innocence to people who are committed to misinterpreting her. Calm is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of self. It is the moment she realizes she does not need to win arguments to win her life back. Calm looks like pausing before responding instead of firing back to defend herself. It looks like saying, "I need a moment," instead of forcing an instant answer. Her nervous system is not ready to give. It looks like choosing to go for a walk, breathe, or sit with the feeling instead of performing emotional labor to ease someone else's discomfort. Calm is not avoidance. Calm is self-respect. Jung would call it a return to the self, the inner center that has always existed beneath the noise. This shift becomes visible in her body first. Her voice gets steadier, her breathing slows down, her posture changes, her chest loosens, her words stop shaking. The panic that once made her small no longer decides the tone of her responses. She speaks less but means more. She answers more slowly but chooses better. She stops negotiating with fear and starts negotiating with reality. Emotional urgency turns into emotional precision, and in that precision, she becomes someone her younger self never knew she was allowed to be. Real-life examples make this transformation unmistakable. A partner tries to pull her into an argument, and instead of defending herself for the 10th time, she says, "I will talk when I feel grounded." A friend jokes at her expense in front of others, and instead of laughing it off, she says, "That did not feel good to me." A coworker pushes responsibilities onto her, and instead of absorbing them quietly, she answers, "That is not mine to manage." None of these moments is loud. They are quiet revolutions. Each one rewrites a lifetime of overreaction and over-responsibility. Each one repairs the nervous system that was trained to confuse chaos with connection. Here is your practical value in one simple ritual. Before responding to anything stressful, pause for 10 seconds. Feel your feet on the ground. Let your body settle before your words arrive. Those 10 seconds are not a delay. They are a boundary. They are proof that you are no longer living at the mercy of your first fear. And the moment your energy changes, Your relationships cannot stay the same. There comes a moment when a woman realizes she has been giving out her emotional energy like spare change to people who never intended to invest back. It does not happen in one dramatic revelation, but in a quiet awareness. Every time she explained herself to someone unwilling to listen, she was teaching them that confusion could be used as a leash. Every time she justified what was already true in her heart, she was paying a price just to exist in the room. And then one day, the explaining stops. A woman who stops explaining is not becoming cold, she is becoming clear. She no longer rushes to prove her intentions to those committed to misunderstanding her. She no longer stays up rewriting messages so her feelings sound softer, smaller, easier to hold. She no longer puts her emotional truth on trial for people who refuse to be a jury of honesty. She stops chasing clarity from people who never wanted to understand her in the first place. She becomes someone others must adjust to or lose access to. In real life, this shift looks surprisingly simple. She gets a text dripping in passive aggression, and instead of crafting a paragraph of defense, she replies, "This does not feel good for me. I will speak when I am grounded." She hears an accusation that twists her character, and instead of unraveling herself to explain, she answers, "That is not accurate, and I am not debating my reality." She feels the urge to fix someone's disappointment, and instead of scrambling for approval, she reminds herself, "Their reaction does not make me wrong." This is what Jung would call a collapse of the persona. The old mask she wore to be accepted begins to fall away. She no longer sacrifices her peace to be understood. She no longer trades her clarity for the illusion of being liked. She discovers that the moment she stops performing emotional availability for chaos, the entire dynamic of the relationship changes. Some people step closer with respect, some step back with resentment. Both are answers. This is where emotional boundaries become spiritual thresholds. Her silence no longer comes from fear, but from discernment. She is not withholding connection. She is withholding access. She is choosing where her truth lands. She is learning that not everyone deserves a front-row seat to her healing. Here is the practical value that anchors this shift into reality. I will respond when I am clear, not when I am overwhelmed. This sentence is not a wall. It is a doorway. It gives her time to breathe before she bleeds. It gives her space to think before she speaks. It gives her permission to protect the parts of her that were once handed away too quickly. And slowly, she notices the landscape of her relationships rearranging itself. The ones who were using her emotional labor struggle to recognize her. The ones who relied on her confusion begin to lose their script. The ones who truly value her rise to meet her in the clarity she now chooses. And when relationships rearrange, life itself begins to answer differently. There comes a moment when a woman stands at the edge of her own exhaustion and realizes something quietly devastating. She has been begging life for what should never have required convincing, begging to be chosen, begging to be understood, begging to be loved in a language that hurt her to speak. She did not know it was begging at the time. It looked like effort, patience, loyalty, and compassion. Only later does she see it clearly. It was survival dressed as devotion. Life does not reward desperation. It rewards alignment. Jung believed that the outer world bends around the inner state, as if reality itself listens to conviction. A woman whose worth depends on being held will chase hands. A woman whose worth depends on being seen will chase eyes. But a woman whose worth depends on knowing herself will not chase at all. She stands still, and the world has to decide if it can meet her there. In real life, this shift is not poetic. It is practical. She used to stay awake to keep a conversation alive. Now she closes her phone and lets silence decide the truth. She used to drive across town for a man who could not drive across his ego. Now she invests energy where reciprocity lives. She used to break herself open to prove she was good. Now she protects her peace like it is sacred architecture. This is what emotional alignment looks like. She stops trying to earn what she deserves. She stops shrinking to fit rooms that never wanted her full size. She stops performing for people who clap only when she collapses into someone easier to control. Begging made the world heavy. Alignment makes the world honest. Jung would say, this is the moment the unconscious stops asking for permission and starts asking for direction. Something internal clicks. Her nervous system stops vibrating like an alarm. Her decisions stop sounding like apologies. The future stops looking like a battlefield. She begins to choose what matches her energy instead of tolerating what drains it. She learns that the universe is not withholding from her. It is waiting for her to stop handing her power to places that misuse it. Here is the practical value that anchors this transformation. If it is mine, it will stay. If it is not, it will go. I remain. This is not a poem. It is a boundary. It is a refusal to chase what leaves and a refusal to cling to what hurts. Say it once a day. Say it until the body believes it. Say it until the fear of losing someone becomes smaller than the fear of losing yourself. And then life starts to respond. Opportunities appear where pressure used to live. People who took you for granted begin to notice your absence. Conversations that once spiraled now find clarity. The path forward stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like a return to your center. This is where the story changes. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because she stops approaching life from the posture of lack. She stops begging, she starts becoming, and the world has no choice but to adjust. And that is when the title becomes real in her life. There comes a point in a woman's life when she realizes that things did not fall apart because she was weak. They fell apart because she was not in herself. She was living from fear instead of clarity, from obligation instead of choice, from hope instead of reciprocity. When she rises back into the center of her own life, the world does not magically fix itself, but it does begin to rearrange around her. Not because fate suddenly becomes generous, but because she stops negotiating with what drains her. Carl Jung believed that the outer world mirrors the inner state. When a woman is lost inside herself, reality reflects confusion. When she is steady, reality reflects alignment. Things fall into place when she does, because she is finally standing where life can find her. That is why the journey was never about being perfect. It was about returning. Returning to the body, to the intuition, to the truth. She was silenced to belong to places that never chose her fully. In real life, this does not begin with dramatic announcements or sudden reinvention. It begins quietly. She stops responding to messages that demand emotional labor she cannot afford. She lets calls go unanswered when her energy is not available. She stops volunteering due to her own exhaustion. She takes a breath before reacting. She lets silence speak where explanations once exhausted her. In those moments, the universe learns how to treat her by watching how she treats herself. This is the point where life tests her with invitations that look like lessons. Someone may return and say all the right words, but none of the right actions. An opportunity may appear that feels exciting but violates her peace. A friendship may ask her to shrink again. These are crossroads, not punishments. The woman she used to be would bend. The woman she is becoming does not. She chooses alignment over attachment. clarity over chaos, and direction over distraction. And slowly, life responds. The friendships that stay begin to feel lighter. The relationships that remain begin to feel mutual. The decisions that once terrified her begin to feel clean. Even solitude stops feeling like abandonment and starts feeling like oxygen. That is when everything begins to fall into place, not because she forced the outcome, but because she stopped forcing herself to stay where she did not belong. She stops chasing, she starts choosing, she stops begging, she starts becoming. The world adjusts to the posture of her spirit. Here is the valuable lesson at the heart of everything. Things do not fall into place when the world changes. They fall into place when you change, when you choose yourself without guilt, when you honor your energy without apology, when you stop performing for love and start living from it. So if you feel something shifting inside you, do not rush to control it. Let it unfold. Let it cost you who you were while it prepares you for who you are becoming. Life is not waiting for a perfect version of you. It is waiting for a present. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.